Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to a very special Grumpy Nostalgia, the show where we usually go back to our blockbuster new release wall of our memory, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in our VCR, and see what time has done to it. But not this week. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Just repeat to yourself, it's just a show.
Just relax, right, Mike? And we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane, but in a different way. So, Mike, we're going to try something a little different here. We're going to break format just slightly.
A little bit.
Just a little bit. So, we're entering our third year podcasting, guys. We just turned 2. Our second birthday was a few weeks back, and we're trying to explore different ways to approach the podcast. And one of the things we've noticed in our very early infancy here is that, we look very closely at our analytics and our downloads, and we realize that sometimes movies get a lot more downloads than the others, and we think that might be for a couple of reasons. One is we haven't established ourselves as the host. People aren't tuning in for us, maybe tuning in for a hot take on a movie. So what we notice is we get a good amount of downloads in every one, but they're typically not from the same people. So we've understood that some people listen to some episodes based on the type of movie or the specific title, and some kind of tune that off. So we want to run an experiment, if nothing else, a social experiment, Mike. See cool. If it's what's the appeal of the show? Is it the movies we talk about, or is it us?
Gotta go with the movies.
I gotta go with the movies. I don't think it's our milkshake bringing people to the yard, but so what we want to do today. The premise of the podcast, of course, was we want to talk about nostalgia and it's how powerful an entity it is, right, Mike?
Yeah, what we see it in a lot of movies today, and I think that's probably what led us to this point where we are now, is what can get people's butts back in the seats. And it's usually something like, oh my gosh, I remember that from that, and I remember that from that movie, and it's the only way they seem to be able to create some of the new movies we see today.
Yeah, and nostalgia plays this role in several things about pop culture. So everybody wants their childhood cereals to taste the same. They want the places they grew up to be the same. And even on that very first episode with Mike, we talked about Thomas Wolfe and his famous saying, "You can never go home again." And he's from Nashville. I didn't know that. I'm just local.
Yeah, he has go visit his house there.
Yeah, sounds like a really happy guy, by the way. But one of the things he pondered about is, what he's trying to say there is we tend to remember things in an overly positive light, and that sometimes in times of quiet desperation, we cling to these things in hopes they come back, to the point where we kind of blind ourselves, right? So with film, because that's the topic that me and Mike seem to gravitate more towards the nostalgia impact on film was really high. And it perpetuated this podcast, if nothing else. So we thought that phenomenon of going back and trying to understand what the draw of these movies is to our childhood was really interesting to explore, and we enough for us to start a podcast for it. So we thought in this special fun-sized episode, Mike, we're going to go a little shorter this week. It's just like a regular episode, only it's fun.
Just like those stupid little candy bars that always seem too small to be fun.
Yeah, just like those, you're not going to get your money's worth out of this one.
No.
But we thought we'd take a chance to maybe run a short little series of things based on nostalgia, and we're going to call this poached pop culture. So what we're trying to say by that is, as you go back without your rose-colored glasses on, you start to see that you become enamored with these concepts to the point where you're kind of colorblind to all these modern pop cultures. We accept reboots and reimaginings and remakes of movies without really understanding that it's just rehash. They're trying to slip one past the goalie, Mike. We've seen a lot of this stuff before. So to not be too accusatory, we decided that we'd fall on our sword for the first episode here in terms of people doing things that have already been done. And for this week's episode, we want to kind of focus primarily on the show Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, a show that I think it was one of the first things we were surprised when we met, 25 years ago or 24 years ago. Oh my gosh, you like that show? Yeah, I like that show. Yeah, and it was one of the things that kind of drew us together.
Yeah, it's shocking that the phenomenon of Mystery Science Theater is pretty humble and modest in its origin. So for those unfamiliar, this show started in the late 80s, I think in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1988. A comedian named Joe Hodson was hosting movies at a local, essentially cable access, a UHF channel, KTMA. For the station had this surplus of like really bad movies that they could get no really could get any ratings on. But they were just there to fill up, airtime really. And they asked Joel to kind of host this thing, and he put a new spin on it where he created this concept around the show where he played the role of a stranded astronaut, captured, kidnapped, put up into space by evil scientists. And he was forced to watch these terrible movies under duress. And his only defense for those was he would sit silhouetted in the theater, and he would make jokes. And when you think about snarky Gen X stuff, Mike, and that's about you can't get any more 90s than that,
No.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the show became like a local hit, and it this is before the internet, guys. So this show's fan base, its cult following, if you will, to the point where it grew so far as where me and Mike got hold of it in different areas of the country at about the same time, was the proliferation of people would record the show on VHS tapes, and then they would recirculate tapes. They would share that with their friends, to the point where they had this tremendous following, to the point where a fledgling cable channel, Comedy Central, decided to take a flyer on this one and actually put it on the air, and to tremendous fanfare. And then that just kind of grew, and they started to build their fan base on Comedy Central. More tapes got circulated, and I think this is around the time that I got into it, Mike. I think the first time I saw an episode of Mystery Science Theater was my sophomore year in college. I got an apartment off campus for the first time. We had like real cable, and I was sitting Saturday morning, because then you would wake up on Saturdays at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And I was watching some kind of free weekend Comedy Central thing, and they were showing a Mystery Science Theater episode. And I had never seen it before, and I kept thinking, well, what are these little silhouetted things in the bottom of the screen making fun of this horribly dumb movie? That was kind of like my first exposure. Mike, what was your exposure to it?
Yeah, it was similar. But for me, it was, I didn't see it till it was on Comedy Central. And I remember it coming on Saturday nights. And, that was one of the things me and my future wife would watch, on Saturday. We would, like ordering a pizza and then watch the Mystery Science Theater. And I think, I didn't catch on till at least the second season. So it was probably one of the Hercules movie, or maybe the Eye Creature movie. But it was one of those two. And I had the same reaction you did. It was like, this is what do these silhouettes do? What are they talking? But once we started watching, we were hooked. It was just so funny. And I remember one of the very first scenes remember seeing was what they showed in the promo. The very opening of the movie, or the show, was the Godzilla sliding across on his tail and kick.
The flying jump kick.
Yes, I remember that. I remember both of us seeing that scene and just laughing, and I think that was kind of what did it for me. And it was highbrow enough to be an intelligent show, and there wasn't a lot of intelligent shows going on a weekend night.
No, that's what kind of struck to me is like what the appeal immediately to me was not just the morbid curiosity. Like, why are these people making jokes that I would make?
Yeah,
all those jokes underscored like my resident cynicism and all that kind of thing I had at the time, and it was kind of like a innocent, humble. It was like a more of a defense mechanism type style of jokes. They weren't actively they weren't malicious with any of their jokes. They just kind of pointed out the ridiculousness of the situation in these horrible like Japanese movies or bad 50s sci-fi movies that were just melodramatic and over the top. But they made like nice, mean jokes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't like, hey, that guy's really dumb, or why was what's wrong with that person. It was more of like
the situation. Hey,
look at us. Oh, your hair just got adjusted. Your wig just got moved to the side, or just. It was always movie flaws they would, hone in on, and that was always what was really funny to me. Like you say, it's what you're looking. We do it now when we watch these movies. We're rewatching on Grumpy Nostalgia. It's like we're looking at these movies, looking for those little flaws, or the scene where a boom mic is exposed, or you can see the reflection of the cameraman in one of the windows of a car. It's like, oh, they messed up again. I love that. Just these little things that are caught in. Obviously, it's going to be with these notoriously bad movies. Then they're punching bags for this kind of criticism, which makes them just all that more funnier.
Yeah. So in terms of like historical context of how this shaped and formed us as people, it allowed us all the annotations that we would have to follow. They were pop culture spitting out pop culture
Geniuses.
references. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing. It would take a considerable amount of time and a lot of viewings of a certain movie to catch every reference. Maybe
yeah,
not so much in the first few seasons, but as they kind of got more like a pattern of doing these movies, they seemed
yeah.
like they would just the jokes were just coming left and right. And I got to tell you, as a 20-something-year-old person, a lot of them went over my head, and
Oh yeah, yeah,
there's still some I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that meant.
yeah,
They would have references to things that I'm still finding out about, like Harold Stassen or Leopold and Loeb. I mean,
yeah.
you know, just obscure stuff. You're like, oh my god! It even though you didn't know what it meant, it's still just the way it was delivered and the situation it was delivered
Yeah,
in just made it funny.
they had a very interesting way of like making you feel pleasantly uncomfortable that you didn't get the joke. And my
Right.
mission was if I didn't get some sort of joke, I went out and tried to reference it wherever I could. To
Yeah.
the point now where you can kind of see where our show was, the formative parts of our show were made. It was our appreciation for this show. If there's a joke that you don't get that me and Mike make, there's probably a 99% chance that it came from Mystery Science Theater. These are inside jokes that we've held with each other for years. But that discovery, Mike, was the other thing. So when you met someone else that knew what Mystery Science Theater was, it was like this
Yeah.
very exclusive club where we wanted it to be bigger, but we didn't want it to get to the point where it would get inevitably sold out or commercialized
Yeah.
or
You never want to go mainstream.
no, we always wanted to keep it our little secret, and it's kind of followed that trajectory for its entire the show's entire career. So yeah, as we mentioned, it got picked up by Comedy Central and was an immediate hit. Remember, these are 2 hour long shows, so that's not even a thing at this point anymore. But they would show these movies on Comedy Central, I think Friday nights or Saturday nights, like clockwork, and
Yeah.
it was appointment television for those nerds at the time. Let's face it. And then it finished its run with Comedy Central, and because Comedy Central wanted to do more like original programming, and this is when they started getting into things like The Daily Show, and they couldn't afford to have a 2 hour time slot booked up for like one thing. So under pressure with that, they were kind of canceled from Comedy Central, and there was this huge cult following of fans that pushed very hard, like a writing campaign for some network to pick it up. And then a Sci-Fi Channel got wind of this, and they were just kind of starting up, and they said, "Well, this is perfect." Because a lot of the movies they covered were science fiction or some sort of weird
Yeah.
variant of that. So they got picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel and did another 7 years, and another I think 5 seasons on this or 7 seasons on the Sci-Fi Channel, where they just became huge again. All the time keeping essentially the core team. Joe Hodgson left after season 5 because he was getting pressure to make a movie because Comedy Central was trying to over commercialize it. And he was replaced by Mike Nelson, who was the head writer at the time. So there's what's essentially called the Joel era shows, which is the original 5 years, and a Mike era, for those that are familiar. Uh, but the same cast and crew, the same predominant sense of humor, like-minded guys, very smart guys, making very obscure sometimes references, uh, commenting and satirizing pop culture to the point where it was just almost a work of art, really.
Yeah, it was so well done. Like I say, they seem to have like reached the creative peak, around that season 5, 4, 5, and 6 era, where just every one of those is just was so well done.
Yeah. So we're hoping that a lot of our audience knows what this is. But if you are not aware of Mystery Science Theater, and if you'd like to know more about how we are, why our brains are the way our brains are, it's pretty simple. It's Mystery Science Theater. And as Mike alluded to earlier, when we first met, it was one of those things. It was like in Step Brothers when they make each other say, who was their favorite dinosaur. They both say Velociraptor, and they realized at that moment they're going to be best friends. That was kind of our thing, where we got set up on a play date, of course, by our wives worked together, and through Kathy, just through random conversation, we talked about Mystery Science Theater, and that when
Yeah.
that common thread was even like people I met in college that shared tapes with me. I overheard a group of guys talking about something that I recognized at the show and in the lab, in the library rather, and I went up and approached them, and because I never had the nerve to do that before. I said, "Are you guys talking about Mystery Science Theater?" And they looked at me like, brother, welcome. It was like this
Yeah.
commune I had been adopted into, and that kind of fraternal thing with these fans is just held to this day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like those remember those paintings you would see at the mall where you if you looked really hard you could see the image, but some people couldn't see it, but some could see it.
Oh, the Magic Eye. Yeah.
Yeah, the Magic Eye drawings. It's
Yeah.
like that. Like there would be some people like some family members or friends of mine, I would tell about it and say, "Look at why don't you watch it?" And I'd get back to them, and they'd be like, I don't get it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, it didn't
Ah,
get to you.
yeah.
It must not have reached you the way it reached me," kind of thing. It was like you kind of felt disappointed, but then the other side of you felt a little more special. Like, okay, well, I'm still part of this like elite small club that watched this show.
Yeah, that's a great observation because I've introduced this show to just about everybody I've ever met. And it's really kind of my barometer, my litmus test to see if I want to contribute. Not that it's
the,
that
the
exclusive,
litmus test, yes.
but I mean, what it does kind of signify how people's sense of humor are wired and what their thinking process is, and I like I said, that's a great point, Mike. You don't have to like Mystery Science Theater to be a friend of mine, but it's going to help a lot.
Yeah, it does. It tells me more. It tells me more about you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So speaking of people that are into this show, we mentioned the writing campaign to get back on the show. They were single-handed responsible for getting themselves back on the air after about a 20-year absence through the I think the biggest Kickstarter campaign ever. They raised about $13 million through that fan base after a 20-year absence in pop culture, where they had their very successful run on Netflix. That unfortunately did not last more than 2 years for various reasons. So they left there. They started another Kickstarter after that to start their own streaming service called the Gizmoplex. Another successful Kickstarter. So these guys they've established such a clandestine, silent majority of fans that they won't allow through nostalgia. Mike, I would have to assume was driving a lot of this because
Yeah.
we've been to several Comic Cons and cons across the country. We've seen these guys in person several times. We've seen a lot of their live shows, and you know,
The audience
inevitably,
look. The audience
yeah,
looks like us.
yeah, and more importantly, their kids are there, and
Yeah.
you can tell it's been passed on to a couple generations at least by now, and it's just it's just this thing that refuses to die. And they got to the point where they established their own streaming service now, so they're not dependent on a network to house them, which they've really adapted to the times. But it's just this phenomenon that's just it has held, with so many things that come and go and are so fleeting in pop culture, to be a staple and be steadfast for what 20, 30 years now, Mike. Just
Yeah. It's crazy.
30
Over
years.
30 years.
The premise is just as simple as they watch a dumb movie and they make fun of it. But they've done it so well with such consistently good overall this time. It just inspired us to the point where we thought we would try to poach that a little bit, hence the title of the podcast. But we thought we were so inspired by that we thought we could take our version of this and get translated into a podcast. Uh, but just this is huge fan base that continues to perpetuate this to this day. Some of their celebrity fans, Mike, I always find this to be interesting. So these are not closeted; these are outspoken, very vocal proponents of the show. Frank Zappa was its first big, huge fan.
Huh.
Al Gore, Jerry Seinfeld, Neil Patrick Harris, Steven Spielberg, Bill Hader, the band Weezer, Brad Pitt, Bob Odenkirk, Weird Al, of course. They've had Weird Al collaborate with them before.
Yeah.
The band In Sync, which I was not expecting. They're all huge
Hmm.
Mystery Science Theater fans. Judd Apatow, of course, and even Matt Damon. These guys are all that professed to be, major
Wow.
fans of the
That's
show
crazy.
over the years. And of course, the host of Grumpy Nostalgia, which is to keep good company. We have always used this as our benchmark for what we think is funny. Most of the humor and the jokes we try to derive for the show are really derivative of that. So we hope that you have seen this show. We'd like to use this little mini episode as at least a 30-minute commercial to motivate our fan base to listen to the show, so you can kind of get some context of like at least where we're coming from. But more importantly, we'd expose this amazingly funny, introspective, witty, satirical show that's just a pop culture staple.
Yeah. By this time, my lungs were aching for air.
See, now that is a joke that one of the robots named Crow, played by Trace Bellew, he every time there's a character underwater, he makes that reference, and I didn't know what that was for the longest time.
No, I had no clue. It was referring to a show with Lloyd Bridges, and
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Sea Hunt, right, where he was
Yeah,
that
see,
actor would say that line.
a show, and yeah, and it's a show I've never seen. It's a show probably most of the people who watched this Mystery Science Theater hadn't seen, but
Yeah,
it's crazy. I guess what got into me was that these guys who were in their 20s when they're making the show and writing it are like I said, putting these references, that are so bizarre and just so
yeah,
like all these Marx Brothers. I mean, it spans everything, and you
yeah.
realize
It's
how much media they must have consumed to come up with some of these gags and just one-liners in these
yeah.
shows that it's crazy to me how much they, how there's just the spectrum of knowledge they use in some of these, and that's probably what turns some people away. Which, hey, that's fine with me, like you
Yeah, you could
say.
feel like you're kind of left out at some point if you don't get the joke. But I mean, not surprisingly, the references we pull to when we try to make our jokes, 70s TV, 60s TV,
Yeah,
70s
yeah.
music,
It's like-
the Marx Brothers. I mean, if you go back and annotate every joke we've made, it's probably the same pool
I
of jokes they
know,
were pulling from. So shockingly unoriginal to some point, but
probably, yeah.
so we want to, as we mentioned, we certainly want to encourage our fans to at least just quit listening to our dumb show for a week. Go on YouTube. They have a YouTube channel just called Mystery Science Theater. It's very simple. They're always got movies streaming. They're focused on Pluto TV, that app. They've got 3 dedicated channels for that. Uh, Over the years, they've kind of splintered off into other spin-off groups. There's the group Riff Tracks is a comedy team. They're touring, of course, the country every now and then, but they put out content, same kind of concept. Kevin Murphy and Mike Nelson kind of split off, and I'm sorry, who's the guy? I forget.
Bill Corbett.
Bill Corbett. They're putting out content comparable to Mystery Science Theater. They split it off in another group called Cinematic Titanic, where Joel and some of the early performers got together and performed live shows for that. Of course, the new generation of the cast has come in play. That features Jonah Hill, Felicia Day, and Patton Oswalt. They're currently part of the cast. They're still going strong. They're putting out new content even as we speak. So just really stood the test of time. So please do yourself a favor, check this show out. That's a couple starter episodes that are probably easier for the first person to watch. Mike, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe pick out some starter episodes or like your favorite episodes that might convey what the sense of the show really is.
Yeah, I would. Some of my favorites probably wouldn't be good ones to watch, like some of the Japanese would. But if you want to see just a
Yeah,
classic Mystery Science Theater episode, it'd probably be I'm going to say maybe The Eye Creature. It's got science fiction. It's hilarious. It's stupid. It's
yeah,
hilariously bad, I could just say. Probably Creeping Terror, which is just it's another one of those. It's so easy to riff on these movies because they're so
yeah,
bad, and these guys they seemingly almost get bored. It's so easy for them to just
yeah,
insert these lines into it, and
yeah,
those are both Joel episodes. And I would also go with no, I'm sorry, Creeping Terror was not a Joel episode; it was a Mike episode. But
yeah.
my favorite one would probably be Space Mutiny, which is kind of a
Oh, yeah.
semi Star Wars Battlestar Galactica ripoff. That's hilariously bad, and
Yeah,
probably me and Justin, why one of our favorites, and
yeah,
that one's up there too. That would be a good one to watch, is Space Mutiny, and
yeah. Those are good. Yeah, uh,
yeah. And if you want to see a really bad time travel movie, Time Chasers. That's
yeah, yeah.
in my pantheon of like top three.
Yeah, I'm right with you there, Mike. I love the eye creatures. It was they took a different distribution of the print and put like graphics over the screen because they had for copyright problems. They put the word "the" in front of the eye creature,
Yeah,
so the movie read
the
the eye creature, which they noticed right away.
yeah.
And like my favorite part of that movie is like it's supposed to be shot at night, but
Oh yeah.
all the scenes are set at night. But it's of course the filmmakers couldn't afford the lenses or the the film for that, so it was all shot in the day, and they keep making jokes about how dark it is at night. It's just great.
I
And
know.
they even put in a scene where they could only afford like three full costumes of the eye creatures, and like there's like
This
five or
just
six scenes where somebody's just wearing the headpiece and a black bodysuit.
you can see like the shoes underneath it. It's like,
Yeah,
oh my
they just
gosh.
left it in. But
They,
they don't almost make they almost celebrate it to the point where they don't really make fun of it. They just celebrate someone for they're trying so hard, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. So I, those are great. Those are great to start with. I My suggestion, if you're interested in seeing what the show's all about, there's an episode called Cave Dwellers, which is the first one that
Yeah.
I saw. That's good because because sometimes you're not familiar with the actors' voices. You know, you can't. Who are the Mystery Science Theater people talking? Who are the people in the movie talking? That one kind of stands out more. But
Yeah.
it's more like a this is more like a barbarian story, like a cheap Conan ripoff, which is just got great dialogue. There's an episode called Pod People, which is
Hmm.
the first show of the third season. It's kind of like an ET ripoff. It's like if Alf had like this elephant nose, that's the alien, and there's a little boy that falls in love with it, and there's five or six different plot lines trying to go together, but it's essentially just an 80s horror movie gone very, very bad. And even like a classic like Gamera is a great one to start. Most people have seen some form of Japanese kaiju movies before. It's just really ripe for lampooning, and they did a great job with those three. So we'll put a list of all these movies in the description on our Instagram page if you want to go back and check those out. But again, you can check those on Pluto TV, or more accurately, you could probably just go right to their YouTube channel and stream these. And there's very various rip-off channels that you can just stream these by the name of the title. So that's kind of how you get to go see those. So all in all, we just want to conclude the episode with acknowledging that we are completely ripping off the show.
Yes.
We're going to go after comparable themes where other modern things are trying to pull off some sort of originality without, trying to get one by you. They're just kind of rehashing pop culture
Yeah.
that's already existed. So we decided we take the brunt first, just to show that we're being fair. We completely acknowledge that we're trying to rip this off, but there's other people we're going to go after. We may not be as gracious, Mike. So we can't wait to get into those episodes where we look at poach pop culture. But that's
Yeah.
gonna do it. So that's going to kind of wrap it up this short little episode. Me and Mac just wanted to talk to you about one of our favorite things in the world and why we do what we do, and hopefully give you more context of why we think this podcast is a lot of fun and it's worth telling your friends about. So please do that. You can also check us out on our Instagram page, as we mentioned. We're at Grumpy Nostalgia. And you can reach out to us through an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. Speaking of email, we really want to get a mailing list established to our hardcore listeners. So if you'd like to get set up for that, please send us your email. We will put you on the distribution list that will share all of the top secret clandestine information about the show, just like you did with Mystery Science Theater. You can help us grow the show through those means. And we're also throwing some cheap, some nice, clean, cheap merch just for doing that for free. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So that's going to kind of wrap it up for this tight little show, Mike. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here today?
No, just turn it off. Turn it off.
Turn it off. George C. Scott in the movie Hardcore.
Hardcore.
See?
Yes.
Stupid, horrible reference that's funny as hell. And that's really essentially the theme of that show. And hopefully ours.
There you go.
So that's going to kind of wrap it up for us, guys. So for Mike, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.